Have you ever met somebody and just wondered how you could be complete polar opposites? Or maybe you've met somebody for the first time and you've gotten like a house on fire, but then when it came to crunch time and you had to submit a work project or maybe a presentation for school, you couldn't get anything done. Well, what if I told you that the solution to all of this was just being able to recognize the 4 different personality types, and that the key to understanding people better and just nurturing better relationships lies in understanding this very basic principle found in the book Surrounded by Idiots. So I've split this video up into 3 different parts. In the first part, we're going to look at defining the 4 different personality traits and looking at the 4 different colors that are associated with them. Then we're going to look at some real life situations of when different colors interact with each other and things that can go horribly, horribly wrong. And finally, I'm going to give you some practical tips on how to use what you now know about these 4 different personality types to interact better with the people around you. And as always, the timestamps are in the description below, but let's get right into it. So in Surrounded by Idiots, Thomas Erikson presents this idea that there are 4 different personality types that correspond to 4 different colors. We have red, yellow, green, and blue. And I'm going to tell you some of the personality traits that are associated with each of the colors, and then you can recognize which color you might be. Reds are often powerful, they're pioneering, they're ambitious, and they're also problem solvers. But at the same time, they can be quite opinionated and a little bit bossy. But in terms of reds, I mean, look, think about CEOs and leaders. They tend to have this personality type. In terms of real life examples, you can look as far as Barack Obama or Steve Jobs. I mean, these guys were real reds. And for yellows, these people are defined by their social energy. They are full of excitement. These guys are creative, they're optimistic, they're, like I said, energetic, but at the same time, they don't have that much of an interest in routine. In terms of real life examples, I mean, look, think of social butterflies, Oprah and Ellen DeGeneres, the kind of people that are just infectious with their energy. Now, greens are great. They're quite different to yellows in that they're really, really good listeners. They're also calm and they can be peacemakers. They're also quite passive people. Like, they really dislike change and don't really like conflict. They're kind of just happy to be alive and go along with decisions that have been made for them. In terms of real life, think of people that are really good at listening and just kind of modest, humble people. Michelle Obama or Gandhi, for example. Now, finally, we come to blues. Now, blues are analytical and they're super precise. They love detail and order. They're kind of ruled in a way by numbers and statistics, and for blues, everything should be done by the book. Sometimes blues can appear distant, but at the same time, they're really logical and kind of ruled by intellect. They're also really systematic. So for celebrities, think of Bill Gates or Mr. Spock. Now, the really interesting thing here is that about 80% of people have a combination of 2 colors, and only 5% have only 1 color. But the point of all of this is that most people have a dominant personality trait. I mean, see if you can recognize yourself in one of these colors. So now that we have a decent understanding of what defines each of these colors, we need to look at how these colors interact with each other. But before we do that, I'm going to give you some examples of some negative traits of the colors, right? The thing with reds is they can be a little bit control freaks and too demanding. Yellows can be a bit too consuming and egotistical. Greens can lack drive and ambition. And blues can be overly critical and take too long with doing things. Look, imagine a red personality in a team project with a green. The red's overly quick and brazen approach might overwhelm the green's kind of calm demeanor. And at the end, there's going to be conflict because the 2 are working at completely different speeds and with 2 completely different objectives. Or consider a yellow person brainstorming an idea with a blue. The yellow dreams big and is optimistic, whereas the blue is kind of tied down in like an excruciating level of detail. And of course, there's going to be conflict over which parts of the task are most important and where the efforts of the group should actually be focused. So recognizing these dynamics is crucial if you want to better navigate our professional and personal relationships. A key fact that we need to understand about reds is that they are willing to bend some rules to get ahead. Now, the book uses the example of a guy named Bjorn who took a car to get to work, and he lived pretty far outside of the city and took a, let's say, liberal approach to speed limits. Now, for most of the other workers, this journey into work could take upwards of 40 minutes. And one day, Bjorn overheard his colleagues talking about the difficulty in traffic and how awful it was to try and get to work, but he said it hadn't been too bad lately. Now, when Bjorn was questioned about this, it turned out that he'd been driving in the bus lane all the way to work, upwards of like 20 miles. And that's what he did. Like, Every 4 weeks or so, the police would stop him and question him, but it was worth it. I mean, imagine how much time he saved. All it cost him was the fines. Reds know it's wrong to break the rules and bend things to their own advantage, but since it's quicker that way, they break the rules. That's the name of the game, right? Speed. Now, yellows are great at launching things and projects because of their creativity, but they struggle to see these projects through because whilst they have the vision to see the end result, oftentimes they lack the grit, the concentration, and quite frankly, the listening skills to complete every little task that goes along the way to result in the final project. The thing with yellows is they often get tired and move on. They conflate good with new, and they're always looking for the latest new thing. Think about Apple's latest release of the Vision Pro. Guaranteed that most of the people that are trying out this $4,000 gadget are yellows. Here's the thing. Most people have green as their dominant personality trait. They don't have a pressing drive to achieve a big result like reds. They're quite happy to just sit on the sofa and watch TV. Unlike yellows, greens are not that bothered about adopting the latest trends. They're quite happy to just enjoy their life in the moment and go along with everything as it is. Greens live in a mindset that everything should be easy, and why bother making something difficult if it doesn't have to be? As a result of this, greens dislike change, and they tend to have quite an established routine. So, I don't know, they might have an assigned seat at the dinner table, for example. But greens can be indirect and wishy-washy. They never really have a strong opinion on things and tend to sit on the fence on a lot of issues. So, if a red says that Eminem is a bad artist, a green might say they remember better singers. Or if a blue says that they've lost 4 pounds since Friday morning at 8:10, a green might say, well, they've lost a bit of weight recently. And that also exemplifies how much a blue's life revolves around logic and statistics. Then blues have very little interest in forming connections with strangers. They don't really care for small talk. And this is the complete opposite of yellows. And in a similar way to reds, I guess blues kind of have a real need for control. But unlike reds, this tends to be over a blue's own life rather than others. For a blue, everything has to be checked and then double checked and sometimes maybe even triple checked. Erikson uses this really funny example in the book, which kind of recounts that when he was a bank teller in the 80s, there was an ATM outside of the bank. And of course, this ATM would print a receipt every time a user went and withdrew some money. Now, some people, blues, would wait upwards of 30 minutes in line in the actual bank to just double check that what was printed on their receipt was accurate. And Erikson goes even further than this by giving another example of a good friend who used Excel for his job. So this friend inserted a formula and did all the maths and inputted the numbers, and then it would blurt out a table. But before sending any important information or files, this person always did a double check with the calculator. Well, a red would call him an idiot. A yellow would probably laugh himself to death. But for the blue, this was just being diligent, right? And double checking where there could be an error. So the takeaway from all of this is that sometimes we do things that to us make all of the sense in the world and we can rationalize quite easily. But to an outsider looking on, it looks like the most ridiculous thing in the world. So how do we interact with other colours when they might think we're an idiot? And first off, I want to draw your attention to this basic principle, the harmony versus conflict outlook. And this suggests that initial conflict eventually leads to harmony, whereas supposed harmonious situations initially actually lead to conflict in the long run. And then basically, in order to get along with people, we need to iron out our differences in real time, rather than letting them build up and build up and build up. And to do this, try and identify which colour you are and also which colour your friends and family might be. I mean, look, you'll get better at this over time, but you can come back to this video and consult the information as and when necessary. But the next time somebody does something you think is idiotic, you might be a little bit more understanding of why they're doing such a thing. Now, the basic rule is to meet a red with red behaviour and to meet a yellow with yellow behaviour, etc, etc, etc. This sounds easy in principle, but when you're asking a yellow to adapt and switch personalities similar to a blue, well, that's easier said than done. Now, take a look at this graphic. The colours that are diagonally opposite from each other tend to be the personalities that have the most differences between them. And as a result, these people are going to have the most conflict. Whereas the colours that are horizontally or vertically adjacent tend to be the ones that have a little bit more similarity. For example, blues get on reasonably well with reds and greens, but it's very challenging when it comes to working with a yellow. So the yellow would dive right into a task or a project without any idea of necessarily how to do it or the best way to go about it. They wouldn't read instructions or listen to the specifics of the task. A blue, however, will read everything they can find on the topic and research everything they can get their hands on. But they wouldn't actually say anything to the yellow. Well, the yellow would think the blue is the most uninspiring person they've ever met. Yeah, and the blue would think that the yellow is just all talk and incessantly bussing around without actually doing anything. And I mean, they'll both just end up sitting in corners, both angry, but for different reasons. Now, in a perfect world, everybody could be themselves. Everyone would always agree and there would never be any conflicts. But we know that this is not possible when we're confronted by people that are wildly different to us. And nobody can ever be all four personality types. So what do we need to do when we meet somebody that is vastly different to us? So adapting to red behavior. Well, skip the BS and fight your case. Don't concern yourself with small talk and just get to the end result. Be determined and direct. And just get to the end point, and that will win the respect of the red. In terms of yellows, try and surround them with a crowd, right? Also, put away the instructions. That just crowds out any sort of creativity. Yellows only care about if things work, not really how they work. Also, try and be approachable and make small talk. But at the same time, if there's anything that the yellow has to get done, write this down and make sure to be specific and to the point, because it's likely that the yellow won't have made note of this. So make plans and try and put together a little bit of structure. In terms of adapting to green behavior, oftentimes it's best to just give green some space and give them some peace and quiet. Let them adapt to new and unfamiliar territory and changes on their own terms and on their own timescale. If you've got to deliver criticism to a green, do it in private because they're going to take this to heart. And if there's a plan that you want the green to follow, try your best to explain every step in detail, and then the green will stick to it. Blue behavior can be a little bit difficult to adapt to. The thing is, you've got to do your homework and know lots and lots of information about anything a blue is knowledgeable about, because they'll pull you up on it if you're wrong. Also, if you don't know the answer to something, just say so. Stick to the tasks that you have to do, but also ask blues to stop being so critical of people. Like, pull them up on it. If people are just doing their best, then blues can complain a lot too. What does this all mean? Well, teams work best when they're comprised of multiple colours, ideally all four. People do different things better and work particularly well with other colours. A team of all reds wouldn't work at all. I mean, can you imagine 4 people trying to boss each other about? It doesn't work. I mean, look, there's a reason why countries have 1 prime minister or 1 president and not 40. A little bonus thing as well I found really interesting from the book is the effect of alcohol on the personality traits. Basically, it means that you kind of see a switch. So drunk yellows tend to be a little bit more reserved and quiet, whereas blues are all of a sudden on the life of the party and really outgoing. Reds all of a sudden can be kind and considerate, but greens can become quite critical and confrontational. Now, I don't really know what this tells you, other than the fact that a good party would probably be a good mix between lightly drunk yellows and lightly drunk blues. But perhaps it's just something to keep an eye on the next time you have a work party or you're out for drinks with friends. Now, I really hope that you can implement all of this information from now. And then as a result of that, you can craft better interpersonal relationships, and you can begin to focus on crafting more goals, and you can improve incrementally as a person. So if you want to learn a framework for creating resolutions that you can stick to, check out this video here, and I'll see you all there.